Iraq boasts some of the biggest crude reserves in the world, but it has not benefited from that wealth, partly due to the corruption that's thrived in the political instability that followed the US invasion in 2003. Now, Iraqi leaders are launching a campaign to recover the billions in oil revenue lost over the past 18 years. Paolo Montecillo has more.
This fortress in northern Iraq has stood for more than 150 years. In the decades following the departure of the Ottomans who built it, the Kishla and Citadel sites have fallen into disrepair.
We can't allocate the necessary sums for the maintenance and research of these historical landmarks.
Other historical sites across the country are in a similar state. The upkeep of these ancient buildings has fallen down the government's list of priorities.
Unfortunately, successive authorities, whether governmental or not, have neglected archaeological areas.
The lack of funding has plagued most of Iraq's economy. A significant factor is rampant corruption, fueled by political instability caused by the US invasion in 2003. President Barham Saleh says the oil-rich nation has lost around $150 billion in crude revenue over the past 18 years due to shady deals. That's 15% of the $1 trillion worth of crude that's been pumped out of Iraq's ground during that period, and is equivalent to nearly 2/3 of the country's GDP in 2019. The president has asked lawmakers for more authority to recover misappropriated funds, submitting a draft Corrupt Funds Recovery Act to Parliament on Sunday. His government also wants to partner with other countries and international institutions to go after corrupt officials.
The draft law seeks to strengthen the powers of the Iraqi nation in order to recover money stolen in corrupt deals, to hold corrupt people accountable, and bring them to justice.
Saleh says any cash recovered will help Iraq in its fight against militant groups like Daesh. Those resources will be crucial as the US plans the eventual withdrawal of its troops.
The Iraqi government will ensure the security of foreign mission representatives in the country. The sides have agreed that there will not be any foreign military bases in Iraq.
President Saleh says the funds will help lay the foundation for future prosperity. And as the government tries to fix its finances, those guarding Iraq's cultural heritage hope their leaders won't forget their rich history. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Edward Dehnert joins me now from London for more on this. He's a research analyst at the Economist Intelligence Unit. Welcome to the show. Now, we've heard truly that quantum of theft as claimed by authorities is enormous, really. Give us a sense of what that money could have meant for the Iraqi economy if it had not been stolen.
Yeah, I think the clearest impact can be seen in the state of the public finances. The misallocation of this funding has limited the Iraqi government's ability, or potentially will, to invest in critical infrastructure, which was destroyed almost 2 decades ago. You know, there are some stark examples. If you take the electricity sector, some Iraqis, particularly in the south, are used to spending an average of 15 hours a day without provision of power from the national grid. Now, if you expand that to an economy, that has major implications for commercial activity, for the operation of business. Granted, many firms operate in sort of personal generators, but these run at a higher cost, and those costs are incurred into profits, into wages, into employment opportunities, which are all contracted as a result. Similarly, in the realm of security, the government's inability to provide security weighs on the overall business environment. It deters investment. It disrupts the operation of business on a day-to-day basis. And so public finances are a clear example. I think it's also important to note that Mr. Saleh's statement referred to $150 billion, excuse me. But really, this only captures half of the picture. He's referring to the funds that were siphoned away from the country, repatriated. But in fact, what he doesn't refer to is the equally 150 billion additional costs in corruption domestically, which are incurred. And so really you have a total picture of around 300 billion. And those domestic corruption come in the form of bureaucracy-related bribery, levies, etc., red tape.
And Edward, on that domestic corruption that you mentioned, many of those people who are guilty of doing that are still in politically influential positions. Knowing that, how likely is it that this legislation will even pass?
Well, that's exactly right. I think, in our view, the bill in its current state is unlikely to pass. And that's because of the aggression with which it sets out to tackle this issue. You know, Mr. Saleh proposed that they investigate all transactions above $500,000, bank accounts holding more than $1 million of senior political figures in the administration, as well as some public figures in the business sector. Now, the growing suggestion is that some of those figures have indirect or direct links to members of parliament, prominent factions within parliament, who are unlikely to be keen to have these investigations carried out, crucially in an election year, which could potentially create a huge political scandal and detriment their chances in the elections.
And what about this demand for an international coalition against corruption? How likely are those calls to be heeded?
Similarly, in our view, we think relatively unlikely. And this is much to do with the state of US foreign relations, really. Mr. Saleh called for the US-led coalition to spearhead this anti-corruption drive from a sort of independent position. But when you look at current US foreign policy, the Biden administration is promoting more of a regional solutions for regional problems approach. And we think the same will be for Iraq, particularly given the sort of highly charged, politically sensitive nature of the issue and the Iraqi parliament's already predisposed opposition to the US opposition in Iraq. We think these factors make it fairly unlikely that the US will step in and take a leading role. And really, Iraq's problem will have to have an Iraqi solution.
So a well-intentioned plan, but one that's very unlikely to be followed through with. Edward, thank you so much for your input on the show.